Welcome to the OLV Daily Reflection for Wednesday, May 6th. We hear once again from John in today's Gospel. In this selection from the 12th chapter, Jesus gives a brief explanation of his mission. He says in verses 46 and 47, "I came into the world as light, so that everyone who believes in me might not remain in darkness. And if anyone hears my words and does not observe them, I do not condemn him. For I did not come to condemn the world, but to save it." And the light that Christ brings to this dark world is his love, which is made evident by his death on the cross. And this is why we have crucifixes in our lives, because the crucifix reminds us of the great love that Christ offered for you and for me. And now more than ever, I believe that many of us know the power of love in this world. Our absence from each other, the difficulties of these days, make us realize that love truly is the light of the world. It is our love for each other that lights up our lives. So therefore, when we hear these words of Christ, we have to challenge ourselves to make sure that we love as he loved, that we live as he lived, self-sacrificing love. Now, on the flip side of this reality, when we hear other words of Christ that are sometimes difficult to follow, we always have to remember that every word of Christ is said out of love for you and for me. And let me give you an example of a teaching that's sometimes hard for people. Christ tells us to love our enemies. This is not a mere suggestion, because Christ modeled love for enemies. He told God the Father from the cross, "Forgive them, they know not what they do." And furthermore, this teaching of Christ offers us the best chance to love completely in our lives. Because if we can love our enemies, we can truly purify ourselves of all the impediments to love: hatred, fear, envy, despair, or whatever emotions driving our desire to classify someone as an enemy. And yes, this teaching is hard to follow. But again, if we remember that Christ loves us and he gives us this teaching out of love so that we can truly become more like him, it's transformative. It changes us. And then our light, our following of Christ, just draws more people to Christ. So the challenge again is making sure that we remember what we are about when we follow Christ. His selfless love, and imitating that throughout our lives. Now the rest of the passage also comes into play too, because if Christ, through his love, brings light to the world, we can see why he also says he did not come to condemn the world. Because someone cannot love and condemn at the same time. These two actions are truly antithetical to each other. So, in our own minds and hearts, if there's ever been times where we've convinced ourselves that God has abandoned us, God doesn't care for us, we just have to know that's not true. Because again, Christ never condemns us. Now, we in our own minds may condemn ourselves, or we may think that God has abandoned us, doesn't care for us. But those ideas truly come from within us. Or we believe someone who tells us about this reality. But again, we can't fall into that trap. There's many times in my priesthood where I've had to remind people that God doesn't abandon us, but life, circumstances, and our own minds cause us to go there. Because again, at the end of the day, there's no one to blame about some of the difficulties of life. It's just life. But I do think it is easy sometimes to blame God. When we don't have an answer, blame God. And maybe you're thinking, well, why do we go down this route as humans? Why do we get to the point where we think God doesn't love us, where we blame God for the things? Well, we have free will. We can choose to do that. Furthermore, we can fall into patterns of sin. Because as I mentioned several times in these reflections, Christ's mission to save the world does require our cooperation. The persons of the Trinity will not force us to love them. Since we are created in their image and likeness, we are given the ability to choose whether we're going to return their love or not. And they will always respect this gift of freedom. So we are truly able to love like Christ, or we're able to run away from his love. We can choose to follow the light, or we can choose to live in darkness. And again, our God will respect that choice. And when things are difficult, that's when our freedom is truly put to the test. This is why we need to choose Christ now more than ever, in making conscientious choices about how we follow Christ even in these difficult times. So please know my continued thoughts and prayers for all of you, especially as we strive to love like Christ and bring his light to this very, very dark world. Our Lady of Victory, pray for us.